Now that we've covered the items to look at, let's take a look at these capabilities inside of your SharePoint site. So here we are back at our team site that we were working on earlier. And first thing we're going to look at is the navigation that we talked about. We actually have, you can see the automatic navigation across the left side, which takes us into the content on the site itself. And then we have our home link, which brings us back to our team site right there. You notice because we're administrators, we actually have an edit links on each of these so that we can actually go in and move things around or add links onto these. This is the manual navigation I was talking about. So we can actually go in. Whereas with earlier SharePoint sites, we actually had to choose either manual or automatic. We can actually blend these in. So if I wanted the site contents above the recent, we just have a bit of JavaScript and away we go and save it. And at this point, we actually have these will automatically be updated, but it'll keep our order that we put it in there. So very, very useful there. Again, you can do the same thing with the links, and this will actually give you the links to your site, and I'll actually show on how you can do the subsites with this as well. And then for the cross page, you can actually see that we're not connected to a portal at this point, so we don't have a link up there. Normally that would be to our portal. Our news feed would take me to my site, which gives me my information about across all the different sites. My SkyDrive, which pushes down information that I can sync locally, and the sites, which actually shows all the different sites that I'm a member of and what's going on with that. So you can actually see how these three different types of navigation integrate together to make it look really, really nice. So let's actually go through and take a look at the management tasks that we were talking about. Easiest way to go in is site contents and then settings. Because I mentioned it and we're here, I'll note that we have our recycle bin. It's showing us how many files that we have in there, or how many items we have, which is none. So that's a good, easy way to check and see if you've got a bunch of things sitting in your recycle bin. So in our settings, if you take a look here, one thing you'll notice, and this is where I was talking about with the site collections and then the site collections and the sites themselves, everything that I've got highlighted here is for your site. Let me go back through. And you'll actually see this on the subsites. We'll go in and take a look at that in just a second. I'll create a subsite so you can see. But the site collection administration happens just at your top level site, at the site that is at that site collection top. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to go through these specific items that you'll see on your top level site, and then we'll dive a little bit deeper into what happens in the site itself rather than the site collection. I mentioned the recycle bin. Note we have the recycle bin here is for the site collection. It'll take just a second for this to come up. We have our wonderful SharePoint working on it, notice. And as you can tell with SharePoint, if you haven't been in a place for a while, it takes just a minute. So we can actually see what's going on. We can actually see what the end user recycle items are, which are that first level of recycle bin. And then you can actually see, this is a nice little feature that's here, is deleted from end user recycle bin. So if someone's gone in there and cleaned up their recycle bin, you can actually see what was there. I'm not going to click on it because we don't have anything here, but this is the way you can actually go in and see what's going on in that, see how much space that you've got. You can actually do see what the size of it is, see what's going on, what's happening with here, when it was deleted, who deleted it, when it was created. So there's a lot of good information in there that you can see, not just on this site, but on all your subsites, because this is that site collection recycle bin. I'm not going to go through the search results because if you're interested in that, I highly recommend that you take the SharePoint Administrators course, the full administrator. There's a lot in there that you can do with search results, but it does get a bit complex. This is good that you can actually go through, and I'll just show you for just a second, and you can see where the information is coming from, what site, where the results are coming from, and what's been configured for you. So you can actually go in and see, you can put news sources, new result sources and things like that. Again, I wouldn't recommend as a site collection owner worrying about that too much. That being said, if you're the owner of something that's a fairly large site collection, that might be something you want to dig in a little deeper with the other course. One of the things you do want to know, though, is things such as site collection features. SharePoint has capabilities. We saw the apps when we were doing the install, when we were creating the new list and the discussions and the project files. But SharePoint has, generally these are non-user interactive capabilities called features. You'll actually go through and see that some have been put on your SharePoint implementation by the farm administrators, and you can see what's there and what's activated and what's not. I would say be careful with these. Take a look and see if you've got something that might be interesting. But if it's not activated and if it's not active, probably want to check with your farm administrator to see if you really need that or not. There are things such as cross-site content publishing. This is something that if your site collection actually has those content sources that you want to push out to the rest of your organization, that might be something you're very interested in. But this is a team site. This doesn't actually have it by default. You need to see if maybe you've got the wrong site template here, or if there's or if it's something that you can activate and what it would do. So this is one of those pieces where your SharePoint farm administrators can really give you a help with that. One thing that is kind of useful is the custom site collection help. This is one I do suggest that if you've got a large group of people or if it's a fairly public site collection, take a look at. This lets you put custom help inside of your site collection. So if you've got things like maybe industry-specific terms, or if you've got different processes that are very specific to what you're doing, instead of putting it in a document somewhere, which you probably will do anyway, but if you actually want to put some help in here, this will show you how to actually go through, edit your help, put it in so that when people hit F1 on a page, they can get your custom help. When they actually go searching for information, it can pop up there. It's really kind of useful, but it is one of those things that does take a good bit of time. Anytime anybody who's written a good help document can let you know there's a lot of information you've got to put in there, and there's a lot of things you kind of have to do. So making sure that you know it's there, but probably something you're going to look at a little bit later on as you kind of get more comfortable with the SharePoint site. If you notice, we've got disposition approval workflow, keeps track of when things are retained or when it's deleted. If you're an organization that has a destroy by date or something like that, this is very useful because basically that workflow says, keep an eye on this document. When it's old, review it, see if it's time to be destroyed, if it needs to be updated, or if we just need to keep it. It's already built in there. We're going to talk about workflows a little bit later in this course, but just know that these are some of the out-of-the-box ones that you can look at. And I'm not going to go through all of these. There are things such as the document ID service, which is you can actually have custom IDs for each of your documents. So no matter what happens, that version has a custom ID that you can always get to wherever it needs to go to, wherever it is. So for things like the records management templates that I was talking about, this would be available for that. So you can actually go through and see, lots of different features that you can go through, and there's a little description on each one of them. You can see these are library and folder based retention. It is active. I can deactivate it. If I deactivate it, then it's not going to be available on my site. It will warn me if it's something that I probably don't want to do, or if there's other features that are dependent upon it. That's one of the things you do need to watch out for, is turning things off that you kind of other things need. Very important to keep an eye on that and make sure that you're not killing something that you really want to do. And I'll just scroll down, let you take a look at this, but these will generally change depending upon how your server farm is configured. Again, I'm going to flip through it just a little bit so you can see some of the things that are here. And you'll see that things like the 3-state workflow, which we're going to look at in the workflow section, we're going to actually see what's going on and talk a little bit about that when we get to that point. So these are the features. You can always review these. If they're set up so that you have permission to activate them, you'll see that you have that option there. I do recommend reviewing and making sure you understand what each of these features are before you turn them on, because there are some that can actually change a good bit about how your SharePoint site works, and you want to be ready for that. So we can actually go through and see our site hierarchy, and you see right here, there's nothing there. As a matter of fact, let me just go through and before we go too much deeper into this, let me actually do a subsite so we can actually see what we've got here. And I'll just do a quick subsite, and it'll be a subproject 1. And do a project site. I'm doing this so you can actually see, remember when you're doing site collections and sites, you don't have to actually do the same template. So you can actually put projects under teams. You can put a community site there or a blog. All of these kind of things can be done. I am going to use the same permissions. This is that permissions inheritance that I mentioned that you do want to do unless you really need to change it up. Display the site on the quick launch. I will say yes. And on the top bar, you can choose one or the other. If you have a preference, you can do that. And we're not going to use the top bar link from the parent site because it gets a little confusing if you do that. If you say yes, then the subsite will have the same parent bar as the parent. If you're doing that, I would say definitely put it on the quick launch of the parent site, which is the side, so you can actually get back around once you're doing that. But I'll do this, and it'll take just a second to create our subsite. And then once we do that, we'll go back and take a look at that site hierarchy. All right, and we've got our subproject. Let me bump back up. And as you can see, because I'm on the subsite, I'm on the subproject. So what we want to do is bump up a site. And generally right now, the easiest thing to do that is going to be just removing it. And when we get up here, we can actually see there's our team site and there's our subproject. Now, if I had said for the subsite to use the team site top bar, I would have continued to see this team site and I could have gone straight back to it. That may be how you want to use your navigation. That may not be, but that's what you get a choice of how you can make that work. So let's go back to our site contents, our settings, and then our hierarchy. And now you can see that we've actually got our subsite here, which our subproject, which you can actually see what's going on and go directly to manage that. We'll go in and you can see if I want to do this, I've got my standard site management options, but what I don't have is that site collection. It's telling me I'm not at the top level, so I need to go back up to be able to see that. And we're back at our SharePoint team site, and we're in our settings option. So you can actually see the hierarchy lets you know, especially if you've got some sites and subsites that are fairly complex, you can very, very quickly get back to where you need to be. You can move around fairly quickly, and you can see exactly what you've got in the different areas. Now what we want to do is take a look at the site collection audit settings. You remember I'd mentioned that there are a lot of things you can do in here. One of the things to worry about, though, is by default you don't trim the audit log. That's not a bad thing. You make sure that things don't get lost. But you can actually build up a lot of audits. So I do recommend that you trim it for however much space that you want to. We'll trim it for, let's say, 30 days. And we can store it offsite we can store it in a different location before we trim it. Depends on what you want to do there. Generally, if you're not checking your audit logs within 30 days, you might want to be careful about that. If you do have things that you need to report on at a time later on than that, then you can go in there and say where you want it to be. You can see it drops into everything from a document library to custom list if you wanted to. So you've got a lot of that options there. Just be aware of what you're doing. And then here's the interesting thing that you need to look at. What are you going to audit? There's some additional things can be done at the farm level, but right here you can actually say, what do I want to audit? you can actually see when anybody opens or views a document, views a list, or viewing from properties. This is one of those things where I always like pointing this out to, again, I kind of pick on them a bit, but the HR groups, because if you've got a situation where you need to know that people have reviewed documents or that they've actually seen it, this will actually let you know that people have opened it, and it'll tell you when they did. So somebody comes back and you say, make sure that you can actually do a report if you wanted to. Here's all the people who have reviewed the new policy or done whatever, and be able to check and see who hasn't. So that's one of those kind of non-standard things on auditing that's very useful. You can do auditing on editing, checking in or out, moving or copying. So if you wanted to see if somebody was copying a file, you could grab it right there, and deleting or restoring, which is something that generally you want to audit, at least kind of cursory, to see what's been deleted and what's going on or what's happening there. And on the list, libraries and sites, the editing content types and columns that they have permission. You want to see if they've maybe deleted some metadata. You really want to pay attention to that if something like that happens. You can actually audit the searching. So you want to see what people are searching for. This is one of the easier ways to find out. There's some other ways if you get deep into the search capabilities, but that's one of the things you can do there. And then editing users and permissions. I would recommend that you almost always audit that, because that's where people are going to be, that's where you're going to see if something malicious actually may happen. You can actually see who got given permissions. This is one of those things that if you've got that level that you can actually catch somebody, maybe they're coming in as another user, giving themselves permissions and then removing it, so that when you go back and take a look at what permissions, they don't have it, but they have had it in the past. Again, if you turn all of it on, you get lots and lots of data, and you're going to fill up your audit logs really quickly and a lot of storage space. Anyway, that's a quick way to go through that. And then once you've set that up, you got your audit log reports. And if you notice, this is using some Excel spreadsheet viewers. We can actually save it here, or we can actually view it inside SharePoint if we actually had something. You can see that we don't have any information there, so we're not going to pop it up. The next thing we'll look at is the portal site connection. This kind of is a navigation question, but it's one of those things that's kind of set at the beginning. You can actually come through and set it up. As you can see right here, we don't actually have a portal, but it is set to connect to a portal address. That's the SharePoint up there. What we can actually do is give it a, let me grab my server name. And I will just actually point it to us since we don't have anything up at the top level. Drop that in there and a quick update. So when we go back in, you can actually see that we'll be able to connect up to my portal. Normally this would be set for you by your portal. If not, then you really wouldn't have it. Content site policy templates. These are basically here to set what you can do with your content types. 1 second, we'll create one. And you can see we've got the name, the description, and the statement. This is where we actually set that the content can do retention, can be audited. The barcodes is something that you actually see for if you're doing documents that need barcodes or need unique IDs put on there. Labels for being able to label the documents and know what's going on with it when it's printed. So that'll come out as well in the metadata. And pretty simple there. Nothing really fancy. Just one of the things that you get from the document stuff. And this is always the fun part of getting back to where we were. The site collection app permissions, which we can actually see the apps and what they actually have permissions on the page. This is so that if you've got apps that are external to your organization, you can actually see what permissions they've got on there. So SharePoint itself is an app, so you can see that. If we had other items on here, we could actually see what was going on. If it was something that you didn't expect to or want to have permissions, come right here and remove them. Very rarely used, but when you actually have a lot of apps, if you have an organization that's really adopting that model, this would come in great handy. And then we've got our storage metrics, which you can actually see. This is where I was mentioning going in and making sure you know what you're actually using. Sites, because SharePoint actually uses fairly expensive storage, and I use that in a general manner because it's actually storing its information in a SQL server, and SQL servers generally more expensive than file servers for data storage. Most of the time you will have a quota on here that you'll need to justify to increasing. This is the place that you come in and you can actually say, what are we storing? You can actually see your folders in here, or your lists or libraries, as you can tell, and what's stored in them, and then the percent of how much it is in your site. So this is one of the places that if you're getting low on storage, or you're wondering what's taking up all your space, you can come in here and see. Maybe somebody's uploaded a couple of big video files. Maybe there's just a lot of data in one of your lists. This is a very, very quick way of going through, seeing what's there, seeing what you need to remove, and or reorganize, or even just justify having the extra space. You can also see the site policies. Again, these are things that you look at in your site. Basically what this is sites are often created and then abandoned. I say that because maybe the project winds down, maybe the last person doesn't turn the lights out when they leave, whatever that could be. What you could actually do is come in here and actually put some retention policies on it that says when you close it, you can close it and will be read only when it is closed. You can actually set all this up so you can actually figure out what happens with those sites after the retention time is over with. So you can actually do this, set it up, and then say after 60 days it has to be reapproved or it is closed. After 90 days it becomes deleted. If it is closed, then it would only be into the 60 days. If it's closed, it becomes read-only, which means nothing can be done to it, but you can still gather the information. And then before it's deleted, it would be reconfirmed. So this is one of those things that is really useful for when you set up the site, so that you don't leave a lot of things laying around and causing problems. Then we come into the content type publishing, and this is basically seeing content types, where they're published, what's going on, where do they go. So if you're actually working with content types that you can actually want to use for other places in SharePoint, this is where you would actually make sure that everything's pushed up. You get the ability to refresh all content types on the next update and see what hubs it goes to. So you can actually see where all of this goes into place. Again, something you'll probably be interested in if you're doing something like that, but it's kind of a little special purpose for a lot of things. Popularity and search reports. You can actually just come in. Again, this is one of your report areas that you see the queries, what usage information you have for your site collection, who's been getting information off of this, what are the queries, what are the queries that people searched on and they didn't find anything. This is really, really valuable for seeing how your users are using your site. If you go in here and see what people are searching on, what they're finding, what they're not finding, this is a way you can actually tell how to organize and see what you need to do. Again, a course in this would probably be a week in and of itself of working on your search, your metadata, your information architecture, all of that. But just know that you can come in here and do a quick review of what people are looking for and finding on your site, and it can really help you manage it and know what can make your site more useful. The HTML field security, this is actually what's going in here to say let users put some content in. This is, if you're using an iframe, if you're doing links in there, and you can allow iframes from different domains. Remember, in an iframe, if the content is isolated, but it looks like it's on your site. So if it's something that you do need to do, you can see some of the default sites here, or some of the default domains here. So if they want to put in a YouTube video, they can actually put it into one of their discussions or those kind of things, and it would work. You can actually, if you don't want that to happen, if you, for whatever reason, don't want that content playing, or you don't want it, whatever, you can disallow all of it. And then you can say, I will allow all of it, just put it into place. So you get some options here on what you can allow in your HTML frames. We mentioned on the help that you can actually do some things about creating new help content. This is where if you had decided to create that custom help, you could go in and say, here's what you can do. SharePoint has student and teacher help for one of its templates. Note those are not included right now because we're not using that template. If we wanted to use that template, these would be included automatically. If you had enabled the ability to create your own help file, you could choose it here as well. And then you could have your own custom help in the help collections, and that would be enable you to more directly give that information to your users. The SharePoint Designer. If you're not aware of SharePoint Designer, it is a tool. It used to actually be part of Front Page, and it was split off to be used specifically for SharePoint. So there's a lot of things that are very custom to SharePoint. It's the ability to really do a lot of the design in SharePoint on a desktop environment. It's one of those where you can cache local files and sync up. It gives you some additional HTML editing capabilities. It lets you have some additional help with putting together the metadata and the columns and all the rest of that. So it's one of those tools that you may or may not want to use. Sometimes organizations don't want SharePoint Designer to be used because it is a very powerful tool, and you can cause some challenges, some issues with SharePoint pretty quickly. You can actually mess up a site pretty badly. So there's a lot of times where organizations will take it off or disallow it. At this point, we would actually, if we did not want SharePoint Designer, we would just unselect there. This also gives you some capabilities of letting you do custom master pages and page layouts, which is, if you think about it, just basically doing some theming and some customization. A lot of places don't allow this because they want to keep with a standard template. But since we're talking about sites and site collections that may not attach with a portal, if you don't have a portal at the top end, you probably are going to be okay with doing that. The detaching pages from the site definition means that you can have something work completely different. Normally, again, you don't want to do this. You want to keep a fairly standard look and feel for the site. But there are some situations where if you've got a good designer that has something very specific, you can do that. And then to see the hidden URL structure of their site. This is for, as an owner, you can see a lot of this in SharePoint Designer, but as a designer itself, you might not want them to see that, but you can open it up and just let them see everything. Again, it's giving more power, but also more risk to messing up the site. That being said, if you've got a site that you mess up, you can always reset it back to the template. Things are fairly easy to do with that. It's not nearly as dangerous as it used to be, but just be aware that those settings are in there for if you really want to customize and make SharePoint your own and work with it well. There's site collection health checks. This is just a quick place. We can run this and just make sure. You can see I haven't run this for this sample. You could run it. It goes through and checks to see what's going on. It can tell you what errors. As a matter of fact, I'll just run this right now so you can actually see what happens. And you can see it gives you a run through. This is kind of an automated check, and we got a clean bill of health. We haven't really done anything to cause problems, but you can actually see here you've got missing galleries. If something happened there that was removed, site templates were changed or missing, unsupported language pack that you got in there. All of those kind of things can be problems. If you have any of these problems, you click on Tell Me More, and SharePoint will help you figure it out. What to do, or you can take that to your farm administrators and they can give you some information as well. And then the site collection upgrade. This is basically if you've got old versions of your site collection, or if something's changed on your template, you can actually go do the upgrade. This is something that with SharePoint 2010, SharePoint's been able to do partial upgrades moving from one version to another. This would be here if you had a problem with doing the upgrade, or you were holding off upgrading from 2010 to 2013 and wanted to keep the old user experience. When we talk about the workflows as well, you'll see some of the same capabilities in there. So just be aware that this is one of those things that if you really aren't really looking at it, or if you don't know why you need it, you probably don't need it.